Welcome to the Sexy Freedom Media Podcast, a place to discuss pain, passion, and pursuits.
I want to feel alive.
Breathe.
Make some moves.
Protect the throne. This is Sexy Freedom Media Podcast.
Welcome to the Sexy Freedom Media Podcast. It's your host, Helen Edwards, and
January Liddell, aloha.
Today we have a very special guest. Her name is Criss Madrigal. She is a first-gen Mexican-American, youngest daughter of immigrant parents, and founder of the Latina Growth brand. She is a 20-year Fortune 500 leader turned mindset and growth coach, international best-selling author, speaker, and host of the Latina Growth Journey podcast. Her mission is to help elevate the collective consciousness of 1 million Latinos and women across the globe by 2029 through coaching, publishing, and podcasting. Welcome, Criss, to our podcast.
Thank you, ladies. I'm excited to be here and just have this beautiful conversation with you too.
Yes, absolutely. So I met Criss at the Latina, I want to say this right, Latina Lifestyle, am I saying that right, Criss? Latina Lifestyle
Legacy
networking event. Yes, it was an online event. It was my first time networking with just Latinas, and we just connected, and your vibes were amazing. And honestly, big shout out to you for starting your podcast. Your voice was meant for it. I listened to one of your episodes, and it was just what I needed in that moment. So yes, your light is definitely needed in this world. So thank you. And I'm so excited to have you on.
Thank you. I take those words and I appreciate them very much.
Perfect. So let's get started. I just want to go back in time to when you were working before the birth of your company, your vision that you had. How was that transition into the entrepreneurial world for you?
Oh, wow. It's been quite the transition, I'll tell you. And just to take it a step back and get that bigger view, I've been in corporate, like I said, my entire life. I spent 19 years with one organization in the human resources space. And there was a pivotal moment in my life. So working in human resources, dealing with different type of characters, employees, and such. And there was a pivotal moment where I received a threat at work. And that was a moment where it was very scary. And I told myself, it's time for me to do something different. But in that moment, I didn't know what it was going to be. We get stuck in our ways of like, oh my gosh, I've been doing this for 15, 16, 17, 20 years. And sometimes it's difficult for us to identify what that is. So in that moment, I knew I needed to shift. But not only that, it's almost like life threw very many different circumstances at me all at once. And I also hit a moment in my life in motherhood where, or maybe not just motherhood, but just in life where I no longer recognized who I was as an individual. Where I looked at myself in the mirror and I'm like, I didn't like the person that I was seeing in the mirror. I wasn't showing up as the mom I wanted to be, as the wife, as the employee. And it was just unfamiliar to who I was. That's when I had to get myself together and say, one, who am I? I had to kind of go within and rediscover who I was. That's what led me to coaching. And as I started to redefine and rediscover who I was, I knew that I had to then come and help the world in this space. And it was just something that when you change, when you identify techniques and ways to reprogram your mind, because that's where it all starts, and completely change your life around, you want the whole world to know about it. And so that's kind of how, it was almost like a sequence of events that happened very quickly, led me to discover coaching, because that ended up being my support. That turned into me becoming a certified life and mindset coach. And then it's almost like everything else just started to present itself. And so that led me to coaching, which then somehow led me to publishing. And then I decided, why not? Let me just throw in a podcast, all while working a full-time corporate job and raising the family. And so all those things combined really is what took me March of this year to say, you know what? I'm doing that transition. My purpose and my life is calling me in a different direction. And I had to take that bold move. Oh my gosh, was it bold? But I did it.
I resonate with everything that you just said because I had that pivotal moment myself as a mom. So happy Mother's Day, by the way, to all of both of you. Um, I had that pivotal moment where I was like, what am I doing with my life? And at that point, I was a stay-at-home mom. So my husband is military. He was gone seven deployments. So that's 50, at the time we were 15 years in marriage. 7 out of that 15 he was gone. So really I was focused on motherhood, but I was in your same spot where I'm like, what am I doing with my life? And actually, it brought me to coaching. So I did want to become a coach as well. I was actually a health and wellness coach. And then I was trying to, yeah, get my nutritional license. Anyway, it was a whole gamut of things. And so I love your story because it resonates with mine. And I hope it resonates with a lot of other women out there who are like, what am I doing with my life? I have a couple that I'm thinking of at this very moment who are in that same spot. And I like the word that you used, I boldly. And it's true. You have to boldly make that move. You have to boldly and courageously think about, well, I do have a short amount of time left here on this earth.
Mhm.
So I need to light a fire underneath my butt and just go for it. But I guess my question to you is for some people who are still stuck in that mind frame of I don't have clarity, what would you say to them?
Sit down and really think about what it is that you love, like you personally. And when you do that, don't think about if it's travel that you like, don't think about how you're going to have those experiences, how you're going to do it. If it's, spending time with certain people, just really focus on what you love. Feel that energy within you because so many times we dismiss that and your clarity will start to come through when you really focus on those things that you love. And I know it sounds simple and complicated at the same time, right? Because I don't know about you ladies, but I know for me as a mom, as, all these different hats that we wear, we tend to put ourselves till the very end. We're the last ones, on the list. We take care of everyone else before us. And in that process, we dismiss those things that we love. Yes, we love our family, we love our children, but what do you really love? And immerse yourself in that energy. Like begin to visualize and just imagine yourself doing those things and that your purpose, your passion, it's going to just automatically rise and become very obvious to you.
That's a great answer. So, Chris, with that answer, when you were kind of sitting down with yourself and you were saying, what do I love? What kind of things came up as an example of that?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So many things, but I'm going to say a couple things, right? A couple things that were very clear to me. One is my family. And that seems very obvious, right? Like, I love my children. I love my husband. I love my family. And I wanted to be able to not only give, but also receive all that love that they have for me. But in that moment, in that space where I was at, I wasn't open to receiving. I couldn't see all the love that my family had for me because I wasn't loving myself enough. I didn't love myself. And so by default, I couldn't see all the beautiful things that my husband would do for me. I was like, no, this man's not paying attention to me. You're not showing me the love that I wanted to see. And we go back and we laugh and we talk about it. And I said, well, of course I couldn't see it because I couldn't love myself. I didn't know how to love myself first. So that was when I sat there and what is it that I love? I love my family. And how am I going to get to that? Well, it starts by loving myself first. And when I started doing that, it became so obvious and so clear that as I focused on me, when I put everybody else on hold for just a moment and loved me, a whole other world opened up. And I was able to see what I couldn't before.
I think the main thing too is that you made a decision. You made a
Mhm.
decision that I want to be loved the way I want to be loved, but you had to love yourself first, and you saw that. So that was a vision or a clarity that you saw. But there are listeners out there that are not at that same, because I know Helen and I are on that same wavelength where we need to love ourselves. Happiness is a inner work, and you cannot find happiness with anybody, with a work, with, a loved one. It's really within ourselves. But I think my next question for you is that there are people out there that do not have that clarity, or like it's so cluttered in their minds. It's easy for us because we've done the internal work, right? But for those listeners out there that are still struggling, and I have like a couple in mind. I'm just wondering, like, how can they get out of that funk and out of that mindset?
Yeah. And it's a really good question because a lot of people do get stuck there. And the women that I've coached and worked through, it starts with one simple question, right? And it's, what do you love? And I keep going back to love because that is so, so important. What do you desire? And so those women that start working with me, that is the first thing we focus on. Forget about everything else and start dreaming. Your number one tool is your imagination. But we use our imagination in ways that aren't always very productive. We're very good at using our imagination to imagine all those worst case scenarios, all the bad things that are going to happen. We're using it all the time. But now we need to use it to sit down and ask yourself, what is it that I want? And when I ask that question, the majority of people say, I don't know. I don't know what I want because you haven't thought about yourself and made yourself a priority, most likely in years. Go back to when you were, I don't even want to say a child, but yes, a child, or maybe when you were going off to college, when you were excited about things that you were going to pursue until society and life circumstances started making you think differently. So go back to basics. And number one is start dreaming. Don't think about how you are going to achieve or how you're going to get to those things. Just what do you love? What is it that you will most desire in life? Dream of vacations, um, business, whatever it is. Start there.
I absolutely love that. I love that you said go back to basics. So I want to move along here and actually go into, now you've talked about your history a little bit and what kind of made you decide where you're going to go. Now let's transition to, how did you come to this vision of, you know, the collective, elevating the collective consciousness of 1 million Latinos and women across the globe by 2029? And why 2029?
Um, 5 years is what I said. And How did I come to that? I have to make bold moves and put goals and have a mission that for many people may seem crazy, but that's what I believe, right? It's when you set crazy, ambitious goals, that's when you're going to be able to start to move in that direction. Because if we stay in our comfort zone and we set goals that we know we can meet, then it's not big enough and it's not going to stretch you to get to where you really want to be. So I'm going to be that person today and set those crazy goals. And trust me, it's very uncomfortable. It's very uncomfortable at times, but it's in that discomfort that we grow.
It reminds me of a book. It was a book I was reading, and it said something about a big, hairy, audacious goal. Bag. I think it was called Bag. Big, hairy, audacious goal. And the scarier the goal, the more like fear that you feel. That's actually where we're supposed to be leaning towards. So my goal, similar to yours, was in 5 years that I was going to reach, a certain threshold. Now my goal is I would love to have 1 million readers for my book that's coming up, and it's scary. And I told my sister just the other day, I said, I'm actually scared. And I didn't realize how scared I was, but I'm scared because that means that's like 2 million eyeballs on me. It's 1 million readers, that's 2 million eyeballs. And I'm like 100 is a lot, and just to think that there's more out there, it is scary. And I didn't realize how afraid I was until just the other day. I'm like, oh, this book is getting a lot bigger than I expected it to be. But I'm still going for it. So it is, just like you said earlier, you have to just be bold and be courageous about it. If you have these dreams and these goals and they all simulate from love, um, getting to that goal is going to take a lot of work and a lot of stepping out of the comfort zone. So how do we step out of our comfort zone? How do we, because it is scary. And I think people get fear, right? There's fear of success. So how do you step over that?
I had to really lean into trust, faith, and belief. Trust that I'm headed in the right direction. Have all the belief in the world that, yeah, this is going to happen. But just faith, right? Faith that every step that I take is leading me to that spot. And there's going to be moments where it's like, this does not look like I'm making progress, because contrast is going to show up. The things that we don't desire at times are going to show up in that journey. But just remember that sometimes those specific steps are being brought to you for you to get clarity, right? If the contrast appears, because it will, it's life, there's that law of polarity, law of opposites, then just believe and just trust that it's being presented to you for you to see that next step. Whether it's for you to get clarity of, oh, this is not what I want, pivot, or, okay, this is pushing me to that next step and it seems scary, but I know I can do it.
Yes, absolutely agree. Now, you have, I want to make sure I'm clear on this. Is it a publishing company or you help publish authors? Tell me more about that and what's the goal of that?
Oh my goodness. I'm going to tell you the right now because I'm not ready to disclose what's coming just yet. But right now I have partnered with a publishing company. I'm a book partner. And the book that I have coming out right now is called Latinos Rising: Breaking Generational Chains and Becoming Change Makers. And so I am currently in the process of gathering 20 authors that are going to be a part of this book. And it's going to launch on September 13th, right on time for Hispanic Heritage Month, so we can elevate the voices of those Latinos that are going to be in that book. So if anyone's interested, there's still space available. So right now I am as a book partner with this publishing company. But as we're having this conversation, I'm telling you right now, I am in that moment of the discomfort where some of those goals are so uncomfortable that they're scary. And I say that because I am like, as we speak, in a moment, a pivotal moment in the publishing space where I need to make decisions of how is it going to unfold? Are we going to continue as book partners, or are we going to think bigger and greater? And that's where the discomfort comes, right? Because if your goal's not big enough and it doesn't scare you, then it may not be, big enough for you. And so right now that goal is very scary. So I'm working through it.
I love the vulnerability, first of all, for both of you, January and Criss. You're both, first of all, we're all authors here, or becoming, in the becoming stages. And I love that both of you have books cooking in the oven right now. It's going to be fantastic. I just know for both of you. And I'm a self-published author myself. I totally understand the fear. And you both are kind of doing it on a fast scale, to be honest. Mine took 5 years. So I went through 5 years of a lot of self-doubt, a lot of blocking my own way. Now, it shouldn't have taken 5 years. But this is how, if those listening or those watching, this is an example of somebody who really got in her own way, got stuck so many times. It shouldn't have taken me 5 years. But Criss and January, they're on a fast track because no matter how they're feeling uncomfortable, they're sharing how they're feeling. They're saying this is challenging, but they're still going after it because of what you just said, Criss. Trust, faith, and I think it's just absolutely amazing. I can't wait to see both of your books come out.
Yeah, I'm excited to read your book. I'm not quite Latina, but I love that you are focused on that group. I mean, even for myself, I cherish and honor my heritage, and so I think we each have a role in empowering, the women of our culture. And we have that space, we have that platform, like the podcast, like the book, in order for us to do that. So I love that we're doing that. I'm all about women of color, people of color. I'm an immigrant, and I don't know if I know Helen knows that, but I'm an immigrant, and that's a whole nother story, in it of itself. We can share that in another podcast, but I'm very excited. I'm excited, and I applaud you for reaching out to, Latinas and having your book. I'm excited to read like all the stories of empowerment. Helen and I were just talking about this the other day, and I was telling her how it just makes my heart warm when I see women empowering women. I think that it in it of itself is the most powerful thing. And you said something earlier about how when it happens to you, you want to share it with everybody else because you want that same feeling or that same excitement to be in that other person because you know that they can do it. If you can do it, if I can do it, they can do it. And you want, for me, that's kind of how I live my life. I think that's how Helen lives her life, is that we've all done the inner work, and we've all been at that place where we were low, where we were, I know for me, I was an immigrant, so there's other women out there who may have gone through the same exact story. And being a coach, and being a podcasters allow us to give us that extra, what is that extra like level, I guess, level up to say, hey, we have this, why don't we use it for good?
Yes. Yes. So good.
Actually, I do want to talk about the immigrant story because you're first gen, right, Criss?
Yes, I
And
am.
there's probably listeners out there who maybe don't understand what that is and what challenges that hold, or maybe what story that is about, because a lot of people don't understand understand that journey and to make it more of an inspiration for others to understand. How can you share something about your own journey about that?
Yeah. So first gen, right? I am a first generation Mexican American. Both of my parents born in Mexico, immigrated to the US. I was born here along with my siblings. But my parents always had that dream of living in Mexico. So my siblings and I spent most of our childhood in Mexico. We lived 6 months in the US, and every December we left to Mexico and we lived 6 months in Mexico. So we did that all of my elementary school years, I think up until I got to high school, where my parents were like, okay, where do you guys want to go to school? Like it was kind of that moment. I'm the youngest of three. I knew I wanted to go to college. It's very difficult in Mexico without the financial means to attend college. So I made that decision to stay here. But it was very interesting for me, even though I was born in the US. And a lot of people, when they see me, they don't know even that I speak Spanish, just, and let's be honest, they think they don't, they get surprised when they see me. Um, but interesting enough, when I was in Mexico, it felt like home to me. When I was in the US, I felt very disconnected. And it wasn't until I went to college where I ended up going to San Jose State University, where I then was in a city that is multicultural because I come from a very small town where only my relatives were the only other Mexicans in that high school, right? Or in the schools. And so that's when I realized how much I value my culture and how connected I needed to be to that. Not to say that I don't value everything else, I absolutely do, but there's just a different level of connection when you're speaking Spanish, when you're listening to Mexican music, this and that, it's a different level of connection. And going through that journey, having that experience of going to school both in Mexico and the US, um, really just built who I am. And seeing those struggles sometimes and just identity, seeing how our culture impacts our decisions, all those limiting mindsets that unfortunately sometimes we carry with us because our parents were immigrants, because they struggled. There's so many beliefs that I had to let go of if I wanted to ascend and become a greater version of myself. And so that's what led me to want to be of service to other Latinas or other Latinos. This work, you all know, coaching, it's for everybody. Now, why does my heart tug me a little bit more towards Latinos? Because I can relate to some of them, right? Those that have to let go of so many cultural beliefs that are holding us back. We're not living the same lifestyle that our parents did. Many of us, right? We've been fortunate enough to go to college, some of us. And so we need to let go of some of those generational things that we're carrying with us that are not serving us to become greater, bigger versions of ourselves.
So as an immigrant myself, it's there were a lot of challenges, and I love that you are reaching out to, immigrants, Latina or Latino immigrants, because it is definitely a different, like it's a total subculture, in the American stream, right? And um, for my story as an immigrant, I mean, there's a whole platform. I wasn't born in I wasn't born in the States. I was born in the Philippines. And so being born in the Philippines, and being, brought here by my parents who were also born from, in the Philippines, it's like a Yeah, it's just a whole new world, and a lot of paperwork happens when the whole immigration process and all that, and it's very challenging, especially if a child is older. And so that was my case, and I was denied a social security number because they just didn't have it for me because I was older, and so I had to reapply. It's such a whew, it is definitely a story. And so I think by reaching out to Latinas, in that manner, whatever resources you have, I think would be great, for them to help them. And even the experience of like being in America, right? Being in America is like a whole nother culture versus being in Mexico, like just opposite, more color, more music, more sounds, more smells, right? It's just like the Philippines, it's the same way. In the US, it's very, I don't want to say vanilla, but it's like it's bland, right? It's not as like, um, and I, excuse me for saying that, but it is. I feel like each of our cultures, whether it be Asian or Mexican, the Latin culture, it's very vibrant, and I love that. I love that it's very vibrant, and I think us being here in the States, we add that vibrancy. We add that color, we add that a different eye, a different perspective, and I think as the immigrant experience coming here to the States, it's really eye-opening for me to see that. And yeah, so I do enjoy, I love that you're first generation, immigrants. So tell me more about like why is it important for you to highlight the Latina experience?
Yeah, because Latinos are a growing population here in the US. And I think it's important for Latinos, doesn't matter, Hispanics to feel seen and heard, to know that, the opportunities are out there. We just have to make them available. We just have to show people that it's possible. And the only way we're going to do that is by elevating our voices, changing our consciousness, changing the way we think. That's why I focus so much on reprogramming our minds to elevate our lives, because it's a shift in mindset. And even in my journey from working in corporate and transitioning into entrepreneurship, I felt like I had to guard my dreams, if you will. And that sounds kind of crazy, but I would only share, and probably still to date sometimes, I only share my visions and my dreams with like-minded individuals. Why? Because I don't want to hear things, or, those that are trying to protect me, of why it may not work out. And so I'll be honest with you, I made the decision to leave corporate and nobody knew, just my husband and other like-minded individuals, right? My parents found out after I put in my notice. You know, my kids, they're younger, but they didn't find out until the day I put in my notice. Why? Because I felt like I could only share that with people that are going to raise my vibration, that are going to cheer me on. And not to say that my family won't, but I didn't want to, I didn't want to get any sense of hesitation. I just needed to keep rising and just be like, yes, it's possible.
I think you did absolutely the right thing because it was your own personal journey, and it was something for you to like grow on. And I'm very similar to you because I don't share a lot of things unless it's with a close group of people, and I will share it with them first before I share it with anybody else. And it's because you're protecting your aura, you're protecting your space because I know I don't know for you, but I know negative talk, negative self-talk. I mean, once that negative whisper comes in my ear, then I'm like, oh, then the self-doubt comes in and all that. So just like yourself, I do protect, what I say to my friends, certain people. And then when I'm more comfortable, then I'll share it with others. And like, yeah, this is what I'm doing. But I think it's great because you are protecting, just like Helen calls it, protecting your throne. So you're protecting your.
Yes, I like that.
I got to touch on the subject of the Latina upbringing because I'm Latina and indigenous, and my dad was second generation Mexican, or I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but his parents were from Mexico, and they built their house with their hands in Fontana, California. He lived with them his whole entire life. I think he moved out one time and then he ended up moving back in, which is pretty normal for, uh, adult Hispanics to live with their parents for quite a long time. Sometimes there's really I mean, just from what I was born and raised to see, there was no like, oh, move out, leave, you got to leave when you're 18. So my dad actually was born in that house and he passed in that house, the same house. And there was a point where my mom and my dad were separated. So my mom dropped us off to live with my dad, which basically now we live with my grandparents. And I grew up watching the mindset of how my grandpa sat at the head of the table. He was super negative and Spanish was spoken in the house. I actually don't speak Spanish, and I don't speak Spanish because, like I said, my dad was second generation, and he wanted to fit in with Americans so bad that he denied us to learn Spanish. It was almost like, no, you need to speak English because now we're in America. This is it. So I was raised with this whole different mentality, like, be more American, pushed into being more American than Mexican, even though we were raised in a Mexican household. Spanish, menudo on Sundays, all the things, quinceañeras and weddings and baby showers every single weekend. So celebration, and I like to say, partying is in my blood. It's the way I was raised. It's something I need to do periodically in my life just to feel a sense of normalcy. But with all the good things also came the negative things, uh, you know, um, and I didn't realize how much it affected me until I got older, until I realized, oh my gosh, how do I break through my mindset of, scarcity mindset, the lack of money, the lack of, all these things. Money doesn't grow on trees, and money is the root of all evil, and just all of these things that I was raised with through my father and my mother teaching me these things because they were raised with this mindset. And now that I'm older, now I'm in my 40s, I've broken through so much over the last 20 years of being on this journey. But every now and then I could still feel myself battling things. And I think to myself, why is it such a struggle for me compared to, Jenny down the block? Hashtag JLo. Who's just kind of breaking through like, it's nothing. I got this. And me, I'm struggling still in my 40s. And I think it really does have to do, when I kind of think about it, where it stems from where I was raised, what I was brought up in, and it still has a hold on me to this day. And can you relate to that at all, Criss?
Yes, especially when you're talking about money, limiting mindset around money. I grew up with a limiting mindset around money where debt was bad. Don't have debt. And I appreciate my parents, teaching us certain things because it's like pay things off, if get it, don't get yourself in debt. But at the end of the day, it's all a perspective, right? Money is money. And don't get me wrong, there's still moments that make me uncomfortable when I'm making some investments that I find myself going back to that old limiting mindset of, oh my gosh, I'm getting in debt. But I have to quickly just come back to thinking that debt is neutral, right? It's what we make it to be. If you think of wealthy individuals, they get in debt to invest, to get the things that the things that they're building that they desire. So investing is just a matter of, how we're thinking it. So debt, is it an investment, or are you saying, debt is bad? So that's one thing that I had to shift my mind on, release those thoughts, reprogram my mind around it, and then really embracing that money's energy, right? And it comes to us. So if I am constantly thinking about, I'm in debt, how am I going to pay this? Then I'm going to get more of that, more debt, more of that limiting mindset. And even though I want to bring in that money, we attract who we're being. It's all energy. And trust me, it's a work in progress when you're coming from this hardcore limiting mindset. It's a work in progress with me. I haven't said, oh my gosh, I've done this full transition. Money's coming to me. There's moments, and I'm in a moment right now of investment and decision making where I find myself going back to that, and I have to snap out of it. And it's like, if I want to pursue the things that I desire, then I need to make bold decisions. And I need to let go of that mindset that held me back for so long. It's not going to hold me back anymore. And I need to let go of that. And it's a matter of reprogramming your mind. What is it that you're thinking? Think about it differently.
And you said it earlier, you said belief.
Mm-hmm.
That's another training I think that we all have done is belief in self, belief in something that you cannot see, right? And it's envisioning, like we have vision boards, and that's a whole belief system. And I completely agree, it's a work in progress, because you constantly have to tell yourself, like daily tell yourself, like, I believe in myself, I believe in the goals that I have, I believe in, and all these affirmations, right? I believe that's going to happen. And I think that's the one thing that I think most of us will have, that whisper in our ear that kind of tells us, it's too good to be true, or it's too hard, and so we'll have these like negative self-talk or self whispers, right, that come into our ears, and we'll say, yeah, you're right, it is too good to be true, and it is too scary, and you're right, we're putting more money to like make money, what, and it's it's such a crazy thing. But I guess my question to you, Chris, is, how do we build our belief system? How do we, because it is a mindset, and you mentioned that earlier, like, how do we believe, how do we have a strong belief and strong faith in our goals and what we're going to do?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Sometimes it just sounds easier said than done, right? Because when you're in that moment and you're trying to change your belief system, you're just like, but it really comes down to feeling that version of your most successful self now, right? And that's how I go back to, what do you love? And get into your imagination. If you can get into your imagination and really focus on all the beautiful things that you desire, and then feel it, start to imagine yourself as that most successful version of you. You're going to have to feel it in your body first, and then you begin to believe it. So by doing that on a consistent basis, like when you go to bed dreaming, go to bed imagining the things that you desire. I'm not saying to think about how you're going to get there. I'm saying think about your desires, right? And start feeling it, because it's all energetics. And we got to feel it to believe it, right? So, and it's one of those things where a lot of people say, I need to see it to believe it. No, you need to believe it And then you're going to see those things happen. And I'll say something that is interesting. When you said, that belief, it was a pivotal moment in me making that decision to transition out of corporate. And I'd been building my coaching business. I'd launched my podcast. I'd published a book, and I had all these things going on while holding that full-time corporate job and the family and all the things, right? And I was asked, when's that date? By a mentor, right? Put a date on it. And I was like, oh, well, July. And why? Oh, like, I don't know, maybe I felt like I needed extra time, right, to do all the things. And it was very interesting. She wasn't speaking to me directly, and later we joked, but we were on a live event. I was speaking at a live event. There was over 200 people on there. And she basically said, if you believe in yourself, you'll leave that job. If you don't leave, is because you don't believe that what you have created is good enough. And I reacted to that. Mind you, there was like over 200, 300 people on Zoom, those tiny little windows. And she said, Criss, I'm not talking about you. And I said, you weren't talking about me. You were talking to me, right? And so because that message really hit, and at that moment, I said, well, of course I believe in everything that I'm doing. I wouldn't be building it if I didn't believe it. And at that moment, I made the decision. 30 days later, I left.
What month was that Zoom event?
I take it back. 60 days later, January.
January. So you said July. So you were giving yourself like a big time frame. Man, that was such a powerful question to ask somebody who said something and said, "Well, I'm going to quit my corporate job." And then when you were asked when, you said July, and then the person was like, "Wow, do you really believe in yourself?" Oh my gosh, that hit home. That
Yeah.
hit.
And the question then was, when we were actually having that conversation, when it was directed at me, I said, why July? And why not sooner? Because I have these things, that in my mind I thought I had to do before then. And in that moment, it was, what's holding you back? And that was a pivotal moment. And I said, staying in a place that is consuming most of my time. I mean, I answered my own questions, right? And so I was like, well, I'm not going to reach the goal that I desire when most of my day is consumed in a place that I don't desire to be at anymore. And so I made a bold move, because what you ladies don't know is that I was a breadwinner in my family. And I walked away from a 6-figure income with the full belief that everything's going to come back to me duplicated.
Amen to that. And that is amazing that you are the breadwinner of your family, because it takes a lot. And to make that move, to make that decision to get out of a steady paying job, where you are getting 6 figures, to now you're an entrepreneur and believing that the funds are going to come in. You're going to make, your 6 figures plus more if you wanted to, right? So it takes me back. So we're talking about belief. There was a story that somebody had told me, and she was in a minivan, and she really wanted a red Mercedes, convertible Mercedes, I think it was. Well, she's in her minivan, and she kept telling herself, this is not a minivan. She's like, this is a Mercedes. It's a red Mercedes. And every day she would get in, every day she would look at her minivan, and she saw that red convertible Mercedes. And eventually that minivan converted to the red convertible Mercedes. She just had that belief in her. And I think that's what we were talking about, was that belief, and how you weren't shy about the July. You're like, you know what? She's right. I'm not going to do July. I'm going to do much sooner than that, and I'm going to go for it. So congratulations to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Are you satisfied? Are you happy? Like, what's the feeling now when you think about what you left? I mean, is there any kind of grief? Or are you just like exploding with happiness and freedom? Like, how are you feeling right now about everything?
Grateful. Um, so I left a 19-year corporate job at a corporation that treated me very well. What you ladies don't know, because we haven't chatted too much, is that our family dynamic is so beautiful. So my husband works part-time, was working part-time throughout our entire marriage, and he took care of the kids. So we have twin daughters that have a 22q deletion syndrome diagnosis, which came with an array of medical, conditions, of medical things that we had to, from open heart surgeries for both to all kinds of developmental delays. So all these things, right? And that's how our home dynamic worked. He worked part-time. I worked full-time, and I had all the flexibility in the world. They supported me, but because I got my job done. So when I think of that corporation, I'm full of gratitude. Now, even though throughout the 19 years, I shifted, and part of me losing my identity has to do with me losing my identity in motherhood. How advocating for my children and, trying to raise our three beautiful children led me to a place where I didn't recognize myself. And so it's all part of the story, right? But I'm very grateful for this corporation who gave me what I needed in that period of my life. So I then made that transition because I knew it was time for me to make that change. And I worked in human resources for 20 years. And I knew now I'm a certified life and mindset coach. I am meant to serve a bigger population. I am meant to serve more people. I am meant to impact 1 million individuals over the next 5 years, right? And so I'm very happy. I don't question it for a moment because all the work that I've done, I've seen the ripple effect in my household to the point where my husband worked for the same corporation 25 years. Today's his last day. And he's moving and transitioning to another place that is more aligned with him, with who we are today as a family. I haven't seen my children happier than they've been now. And I know it's because I am present. I'm not that mom that is gone and only sees them, when we're yelling to get out of the house in the morning and when we're kind of all rattled up to get them to bed at night. They get the better version of me now. And that, fills my heart.
That turns it right back around to love and why you decided to do this. And I feel the joy and I feel the love that you have for your family. How old are your twins and how old is your third child?
Our son is 14 and our daughters are 12. So by this summer, we're going to have a full house of teenagers. My son he wasn't even 2 when our girls were born. So we
Oh,
were,
okay. And your daughters are much better now?
yes, oh my goodness, they're doing amazing. And I know it's because of all the love and dedication that we've poured in our hearts to making sure that they're thriving, that they're getting what they need. And well, sometimes, when it comes with medical stuff, there's some unknowns, but I've no longer focused on the what ifs. I focus on you're going to become the most amazing person in the world. And I tell my kids every day.
Oh my gosh, pouring out positive words and just that's how we grow, right? Is when we pour out all these positive words to ourselves. What is your favorite book or your book that you lean on the most that has given you blessings or has like resonated with you?
Oh my goodness. I'm going to say that the book that really changed things for me, it's an old book. It's called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. The old book written in the 1930s, right? You guys are nodding, so I'm sure you've read it or know which one it is. But even though it's an old text, it's so relevant. And even though when you're reading it, sometimes they're like, okay, I'm not connecting because it's so old, but the main principles are still here today. And that's how you can achieve not just, Think and Grow Rich as in finances. Yes, it'll lead to that, but live that rich life that I see as just love and joy and happiness. I don't think I've been this happy in a very long time or just ever.
Wow. There's something that me and January always say, hashtag aligned. And definitely this is aligned because Think and Grow Rich was actually one of my first books that I read 20 years ago that changed my life as well. So I'm so happy you said that. Hashtag aligned. Second, you're defying the odds that are stacked against you because like you were mentioning throughout this podcast, something you don't know about me, something we haven't talked about. And that goes for so many of us when we look at somebody who's following their dreams, going for their goals, successful or on their way to success, whatever that success looks like for them. We see them putting out so many marketing posts about, this is who I am, this is what I've done, this is what I could do for you, but we don't really see or hear the stories behind all that, which is, raising the kids, going through some health issues, all the odds that are stacked against them, all the challenges, all the nights of crying, all the nights of barely holding on by a tiny, string. And it's heartbreaking. We don't see the heartbreak because we're telling our story in such a short space for people to really just catch a glimmer of hope for them, they themselves to grab onto and let them know that if I can do it, you can do it, but please, believe in yourself. And I gotta say, Criss, you can add me in January to your 1 million because this has been impactful. Your podcast that I listened to was impactful. I got to share it with you, January. It's absolutely phenomenal. And Criss, I really believe you're right where you need to be to serve the Latina community and women in general and men out there too. I mean, I'm sure your light touches men as well. And I can tell it did because you're talking about how it's affected your family and including your husband. So, Criss, let's go ahead and wrap this up. I feel like we have so much more to talk about. You're amazing. So, where can people find you? And is there any last words you want to share with our audience?
Yeah, so can find me on any social media platforms by my name, Criss Madrigal, and that's Criss Madrigal, Madrigal. And final words, go find your joy. Find what is gonna light your heart up and just go and pour all the love you can into that without thinking of anything else. Because we keep talking about it, right? There is something so powerful about love and just being authentic. And that's what I'm here to do. I'm not going to bluff anything, just be authentic and share the love.
I love that. Now, do you have a Spanish phrase that you like?
I don't know that I have a Spanish one right off the bat.
I love listening to different languages. So maybe when we have you on the next podcast, I'd love to have another conversation with you because you are just very inspirational. It's so great to meet you and learn more about your story. And I love that Helen, mentioned that there's all these struggles, there's all these challenges that we face. Yes, there's trust, there's belief, there's faith that we have to, those are the feelings and the things that we have to move towards. But I love that Helen also mentioned that we do have like the struggles and all these different challenges behind the scenes. It's like a TikTok version, right? This is a TikTok version of like, or a real version of like how we get to where we are. But really, there's actually much more behind that. So, love to learn more about you in another podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ladies.
Yeah. So, Helen, where can we find you?
Yes, you can find me on Hell of a Journey with 1L on Instagram, hell of a journey with the number 1 behind it on TikTok. And you can follow me on Facebook, Sexy Freedom Media, or sexy, or yeah, I know I'm sexy, but oh my God, bloopers. Okay, you can follow me on Helen Edwards. You can also get my book, Nothing Sexier Than Freedom, on Amazon and available on Audible. And I'm so excited we had you on, Criss. And January is absolutely right. I would love to have you back on again, just because there's so much, and to find out where you grow and where you become in the next, year or two, or couple months even. January, where can we find you?
You can find me on Facebook. It's Anchored Financial. You can also find me January Liddell, my name. I'm an open book, really. And then AlenaTheHoneymaker.com. That is the name of my book, AlenaTheHoneymaker.com. It should be out by the end of the month, or early June is when I'm launching that book. So that's where you can find me. Thank you all so much for listening. Thank you to our guest, Criss Madrigal. Please search her. She has a goal of 1 million Latinas. So we would love for you to join her movement. Aloha, everyone.
Ahí, muchas gracias.
Want to hear more?
Visit us at sexyfreedommedia.com.